I never thought a random Tuesday in Manhattan would change my life forever. My name is Harper, and 6 months ago, I was living a completely normal life as a junior art curator at one of the city's most prestigious galleries. Then my ex decided to take obsession to a whole new level, and suddenly I had Reese Carter standing in my living room, tall, composed, with eyes that seemed to notice everything. She was my new bodyguard, hired by my worried parents after the restraining order against my ex proved to be nothing more than a piece of paper. Hey, before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you these stories. Now, let's get back to it. Reese wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined someone intimidating, maybe a bit cold and distant, but while she was certainly professional, there was a warmth in her eyes when she introduced herself that immediately put me at ease. She explained that she would be with me constantly for the next few weeks, maybe longer, depending on the situation with my ex. Everywhere I went, she went. It felt surreal having a shadow, but I understood the necessity. The first few days were awkward. I wasn't used to having someone watch my every move, follow me to the bathroom at restaurants, or stand outside my bedroom door at night. Reese maintained a respectful distance, but she was always there, always watching, always protecting. I tried to go about my normal routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every sound made me jump. Every stranger on the street made my heart race. But then I'd look up and see Reese, calm and steady, and somehow I could breathe again. She had this presence about her that was hard to describe. It wasn't aggressive or intimidating, but you could tell immediately that she was someone who could handle herself in any situation. She moved with this quiet confidence, her eyes constantly scanning our surroundings, noting exits and potential threats with a practiced ease that spoke of years of training and experience. But there were these moments, these brief flashes, where I'd catch her looking at me with something softer in her expression, something that made my stomach flutter in a way I tried very hard to ignore. By the end of the first week, we'd fallen into a rhythm. Reese would arrive at my apartment at 6 in the morning, do a security check, and then we'd have coffee together before heading to the gallery. She'd position herself near the entrance, eyes constantly scanning the crowd while I worked. During lunch, she'd sit across from me at whatever cafe I chose, always facing the door. At night, she'd check every lock, every window, before settling into the guest room. I started to notice little things about her. The way she took her coffee black with just a hint of sugar. How she always stood with her weight slightly on her right foot, ready to move at a moment's notice. The small scar above her left eyebrow that she'd gotten, she told me later, during a training exercise that went wrong. The way her jaw tightened whenever someone got too close to me in public. The softness that crept into her voice when she asked if I was okay after a particularly stressful day. We didn't talk much at first. Reese was professional to a fault, keeping our interactions strictly business. But I'm naturally chatty, especially when I'm nervous, and the silence was driving me crazy. So I started asking questions. Nothing too personal at first, just casual things about her day, her preferences, her thoughts on the artwork at the gallery. Slowly, she started opening up. I learned that Reese had been in private security for 8 years, after serving in the military. She loved hiking and spent most of her weekends in the mountains when she wasn't working. She had a younger sister named Maya, who she was incredibly protective of, which is partly what drew her to this career. She'd seen Maya go through an abusive relationship in college, and the helplessness she'd felt during that time had driven her to become someone who could protect people who needed it. She told me about growing up in Oregon, surrounded by forests and mountains, about how she'd joined the military right out of high school, desperate to see the world and find purpose, about the things she'd seen overseas that she couldn't talk about, but that had changed her fundamentally, about coming home and struggling to find her place until she discovered private security work. And she had the most beautiful smile, though she rarely showed it. When she did, it transformed her entire face, softening all those sharp, alert edges. Her whole demeanor would shift, and for just a moment, I'd see the person she might have been if life hadn't taught her to be constantly on guard. I found myself trying to make her smile more often, cracking jokes or showing her funny things on my phone during our lunch breaks. 3 weeks into our arrangement, something shifted. We were at the gallery for a special evening exhibition. The place was packed with collectors, artists, and critics. I was in my element, talking passionately about a contemporary piece to a potential buyer when I felt it. That crawling sensation on the back of my neck. The one that told me someone was watching me, and not in a good way. I glanced around casually, trying not to alert whoever it was, and that's when I saw him. My ex, Derek, standing near the back of the gallery, staring directly at me. My blood ran cold. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to be within 500 feet of me. The restraining order was clear, but here he was, and the look in his eyes made my stomach turn. It was the same look he'd had that last night before I'd finally worked up the courage to leave him. Possessive, angry, unstable. I must have made some kind of sound or movement because suddenly Reese was there. She appeared at my side so quickly it was like she'd materialized out of thin air. Her hand went to the small of my back, a gesture that looked casual to anyone watching but felt protective and reassuring. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly, her eyes already scanning the room. "Derek," I whispered. "Back corner, blue jacket." I felt her tense beside me, though her expression remained neutral. "Stay close to me," she instructed. "We're going to move toward the exit, but we're going to do it slowly and naturally. Keep talking to me like everything is fine." She began guiding me through the crowd, her hand still on my back, steering me expertly around clusters of people. I tried to keep my breathing steady, tried to smile and nod at familiar faces as we passed, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I could feel Reese's presence beside me, solid and reassuring, and I focused on that instead of the panic threatening to overwhelm me. We were almost to the door when the crowd suddenly surged. Some famous artist had just arrived, and everyone was pushing forward to get a glimpse. People pressed in from all sides, and I felt myself being separated from Reese. Panic shot through me like lightning. My hand reached out instinctively, searching for her. Then her arm was around my waist, pulling me firmly against her side. Her grip was strong and sure, and she didn't let go. We moved as one person through the chaos, her body shielding mine from the worst of the crowd. I could feel the solid strength of her, the way she positioned herself between me and everyone else. It should have felt clinical, professional, but it didn't. It felt personal, intimate, safe. Her other hand came up to the back of my head, protecting it as someone's elbow swung too close. "I'm here," she murmured against my ear. "I've got you. Just stay with me." I pressed closer to her, my face against her shoulder, and let her guide us through. I could feel her heart beating strong and steady beneath my cheek. Could smell her subtle cologne mixed with something that was just uniquely her. Could feel the controlled power in the way she moved, clearing a path for us without being aggressive, her entire focus on getting me to safety. We made it outside, and Reese immediately pulled me toward her car, her arm still securely around my waist. She opened the passenger door and practically lifted me inside before rounding to the driver's side. Her movements were quick and efficient, and within seconds we were pulling away from the curb. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. Her hand briefly touched my shoulder, a gentle pressure that grounded me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My whole body was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Reese drove us straight to my apartment, checking every corner and shadow before allowing me inside. Once we were in, she locked the door and immediately called her contact at the police department to report the restraining order violation. I sank onto the couch, feeling suddenly exhausted. The fear was fading now, replaced by this bone-deep weariness. I'd been so careful, so vigilant for months. I'd done everything right. And still, Derek had found a way to get to me. It felt like no matter what I did, I'd never truly be free of him. Reese finished her call and came to sit beside me, closer than she normally would. The professional distance had disappeared somewhere between the gallery and here. She reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted, and took my hand in both of hers. "He's going to be arrested," she said softly. "They're looking for him now. You're safe, Harper." The way she said my name, so gentle and reassuring, broke something open inside me. Tears I'd been holding back for weeks suddenly spilled over. Before I could even think to be embarrassed, Reese had her arms around me, pulling me against her chest. She held me while I cried, one hand stroking my hair, murmuring quiet reassurances. "I'm sorry," I gasped between sobs. "I'm sorry, I just can't do this anymore. I can't keep looking over my shoulder. I can't keep being afraid." "You don't have to apologize," Reese said firmly. "Not for this. Not for being human. What you're going through, what you've survived, it would break most people. But you're still here. You're still fighting. That takes incredible strength." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel terrified all the time. Being scared doesn't make you weak, Harper. Continuing to live your life despite that fear, that's what makes you strong. And you're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I eventually pulled back, wiping my eyes and laughing shakily at myself. "Sorry," I said again. "I'm usually not this much of a mess. You must think I'm completely falling apart." "You're not a mess," Reese said firmly. "You're dealing with a terrifying situation with more grace than most people could manage. And for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. I've seen soldiers crumble under less stress than what you're handling." The way she looked at me when she said it made my breath catch. There was something in her eyes, something warm and almost tender, that I'd never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it, but I'd been too scared to acknowledge what it meant. Too scared to admit that the flutter in my stomach whenever she was near had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with her. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything. For being here. For keeping me safe. For not letting go in the crowd." A small smile tugged at her lips. "I'll always keep you safe, Harper. That's my job." But it felt like more than a job now. The line between professional and personal had been blurring for weeks, and tonight it had disappeared entirely. I knew I should probably be concerned about that, should maybe request a different bodyguard to maintain proper boundaries. But the thought of Reese leaving, of having someone else standing guard, made my chest ache in a way I couldn't quite explain. The police called an hour later to inform us that Derek had been arrested. He'd been picked up trying to leave the city, apparently spooked by all the people who'd seen him at the gallery. He'd be held overnight, and there would be a hearing in the morning to address the restraining order violation. Reese visibly relaxed at the news, though she insisted on staying in the living room that night instead of the guest room, just in case. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's face in the crowd. That look in his eyes, like I was something he owned that had been taken from him. Like he had every right to my time, my space, my life. The therapy had helped me understand that his obsession wasn't about love, it was about control. But understanding it didn't make it any less terrifying. Around midnight, I gave up and padded out to the living room. Reese was sitting on the couch, alert despite the late hour. She looked up as I entered, concern immediately crossing her face. "Can't sleep," I admitted. She patted the cushion beside her. "Come here." I settled next to her, and she draped a blanket over both of us. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself leaning into her warmth. She didn't pull away. Instead, her arm came around my shoulders, tucking me more securely against her side. "Can I ask you something?" I said quietly. "Anything." "Back at the gallery, when you grabbed my waist in the crowd, you didn't let go, even after we were clear. Why?" Reese was quiet for a long moment. I could feel the rise and fall of her breathing, the steady beat of her heart. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you in that crowd. Because keeping you close wasn't just about security anymore. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a job for me." My heart was pounding again, but for an entirely different reason now. I pulled back slightly so I could look at her face. "What are you saying, Reese?" She met my eyes, and what I saw there took my breath away. "I'm saying that I care about you, Harper. More than I should. More than is probably professional or appropriate. I'm saying that every time I see fear in your eyes, it makes me want to tear apart anyone who put it there. I'm saying that holding you tonight, comforting you, it felt more right than anything has in years. I should have been shocked. I should have reminded her about professional boundaries and the ethics of her position. But instead, All I felt was relief. Relief that I wasn't alone in these feelings that had been growing between us. Relief that the connection I felt wasn't one-sided. Relief that this thing building between us, this warmth and understanding and undeniable pull, was real. "I care about you too," I whispered. "I have for weeks now." I kept telling myself it was just gratitude, or the intensity of the situation, but it's more than that. You make me feel safe in a way that has nothing to do with your training or your job. You make me feel seen. Like you actually care about who I am, not just about keeping me alive. Reese lifted her hand, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Her touch was so tender it made my eyes sting with fresh tears. "This is complicated," she said. "I'm supposed to be protecting you, not developing feelings for you. My entire job is about maintaining professional distance, about making objective decisions to keep you safe. But with you, I find myself making choices based on emotion instead of strategy. That scares me. I know. But sometimes the most important things are complicated. And honestly, I feel safer with you than I've ever felt with anyone. Maybe that's because you care. Maybe that's what makes you better at protecting me than someone who just saw this as another job." We stayed up talking for hours that night, finally being honest about the connection that had been building between us. Reese told me about her fear of crossing professional lines, of potentially compromising my safety because she was emotionally involved. She talked about other clients she'd had, how she'd always maintained perfect boundaries, how she'd never felt anything beyond professional concern for their well-being. Until me. I told her that she made me feel safer, not less safe, because I trusted her completely. I trusted her judgment, her instincts, her dedication. And yes, I trusted her with my heart too, even though that was terrifying in its own way. After Derek, after the way he'd slowly isolated me from everyone I cared about, twisted every relationship I had until I felt completely alone, trusting someone felt like the biggest risk I could take. But I trusted Reese. I trusted the way she checked in with me constantly, making sure I was comfortable with our security arrangements. I trusted the way she respected my boundaries, never pushing for more information than I was ready to give about my past with Derek. I trusted the gentleness in her voice when she talked me down from panic attacks and the steel in her eyes when she talked about keeping me safe. By the time dawn started breaking through the windows, we'd reached an understanding. We would see this through together, but we'd be careful. We'd maintain appropriate boundaries until the situation with Derek was fully resolved. Then, if we both still felt the same way, we'd explore what this could be. Reese wanted to make sure I had time to heal, to process everything I'd been through, without the complication of a new relationship. And she wanted to make sure that when we did take that step, if we took that step, it would be because we genuinely wanted each other, not because of the intensity of our current situation. The next few weeks were both easier and harder. Easier because we were honest with each other now, no more pretending that what we felt was purely professional. We could acknowledge the connection between us, could share small moments of tenderness that felt precious and significant. Harder because maintaining those boundaries when all I wanted was to be close to her was a special kind of torture. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Her expression would be so soft, so full of warmth, that it made my chest ache. And then she'd notice me noticing, and she'd clear her throat and look away, and we'd both pretend that the air between us wasn't electric with everything we weren't saying, everything we weren't doing. There were moments when our hands would brush, and the contact felt like a spark. Times when she'd lean close to point something out, and I'd breathe in her scent and have to resist the urge to turn my head and close the distance between us. Nights when I'd lie in bed, knowing she was just down the hall, and wish desperately that things were different, that we'd met under normal circumstances, that I could just walk down that hall and tell her exactly how I felt without worrying about complicating things. Derek's case moved through the court system. The restraining order violation got him jail time, and additional evidence of stalking behavior that the police uncovered during their investigation added even more charges. They'd found dozens of photos of me on his phone, taken from a distance over the past few months. They'd traced purchases he'd made for surveillance equipment. They discovered he'd been using fake social media accounts to keep tabs on me. My lawyer assured me that he'd be locked up for a significant period, and when he eventually got out, he'd be monitored closely. There would be additional restraining orders, mandatory counseling, and severe consequences if he violated the terms of his release. For the first time in months, I started to believe that I might actually be free of him someday. As the threat level decreased, so did the intensity of my security needs. Reese and I had conversations about scaling back her hours. Maybe she didn't need to be with me 24/7 anymore. Maybe we could transition to just having her nearby during high-risk situations like events or late nights at the gallery. Every conversation felt like we were preparing for goodbye, and I hated it. 6 weeks after that night at the gallery, Reese's contract officially ended. The security company had assessed the situation and determined that I no longer needed a full-time bodyguard. Derek was in jail, the legal proceedings were moving forward, and the immediate danger had passed. I could go back to my normal life. Except my normal life didn't include Reese anymore, and that thought was unbearable. We stood in my apartment, her bags packed, and the weight of the moment settled over us. She'd been staying here for weeks, and now all evidence of her presence was being erased. The coffee mug she preferred was clean and put away. The book she'd been reading on the couch was gone. The spare toothbrush in the bathroom had been packed. It felt wrong. It felt like I was losing something essential. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "this is it." Reese stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "It doesn't have to be." "I meant what I said that night, Harper. I care about you. If you still feel the same way, I'd like to take you to dinner. As Reese, not as your bodyguard, just me." I smiled, feeling my heart soar. I'd like that very much. Our first real date was the following Friday. Reese picked me up wearing jeans and a soft sweater instead of her usual professional attire, and she looked so beautiful it made my chest ache. Her hair was down for the first time since I'd known her, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She'd traded her practical boots for nice shoes, and when she smiled at me, nervous and hopeful, I fell a little bit more in love with her. We went to a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, sat across from each other without the weight of professional obligation between us, and talked for hours. She told me about her childhood, growing up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs to support her and her sister. About learning to be tough because someone had to look out for Maya while their mom was working. About the guilt she still carried for leaving them both behind when she joined the military. I told her about my dreams of opening my own gallery someday, showcasing emerging artists who might not otherwise get recognition. About growing up in Connecticut with parents who loved me but never quite understood my passion for art. About my college years spent in tiny galleries and artist studios, soaking up everything I could learn. About the early days with Derek, when he'd seemed charming and attentive, before I understood that his attention was really obsession. We laughed over shared tastes in music and discovered we both had a weakness for terrible reality TV shows. Reese admitted she'd been binge-watching a dating show during her off hours, and I confessed I was completely caught up on the same one. We debated the merits of various contestants and predictions for who would win, and it was so normal, so wonderfully mundane, that I wanted to cry with relief. When she walked me to my door that night, there was a moment of hesitation. We stood in the hallway, and I could see her working up her courage. Then Reese cupped my face gently in her hands and kissed me. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and I felt it all the way down to my toes. Her lips were gentle against mine, asking rather than demanding, and I melted into her touch. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that for so long," she whispered. "Me too," I breathed. That was 6 months ago. Reese is still in my life, but now as my girlfriend instead of my bodyguard. We've navigated the transition from professional to personal with surprising ease, though she still gets protective when we're in crowds. "Old habits die hard," she always says with a sheepish smile, but I don't mind. I know it comes from a place of care, not control. That's the difference between her and Derek. She wants to protect me, not own me. We've had our challenges, of course. Reese sometimes struggles with letting her guard down, with allowing herself to be vulnerable. Years of military training and security work have taught her to always be alert, always be ready. Learning to relax in my presence, to let me take care of her sometimes instead of always being the protector, has been a journey for her. And I've had my own struggles. There were times in the beginning when I'd catch myself seeking her approval for small decisions, or apologizing excessively for things that weren't my fault. Derek had trained me to walk on eggshells, to constantly monitor his mood and adjust my behavior accordingly. Unlearning those patterns, trusting that Reese wasn't going to explode at me for minor things, took time and patience and a lot of therapy. But we've worked through it together. Reese came with me to some of my therapy sessions, wanting to better understand what I'd been through and how she could support me. I encouraged her to see someone too, to work through her own trauma from her time in the military. We've learned to communicate openly, to speak up when something bothers us instead of letting it fester. We've learned that love isn't always easy, but it's worth the effort. Last week, we were at another gallery opening, this one for a friend of mine who was showcasing her first solo exhibition. The space was packed, and at one point the crowd surged just like it had that night 6 months ago. Instinctively, Reese's arm went around my waist, pulling me close, but this time, when the crowd cleared and we had space again, she didn't let go. She kept me tucked against her side, and when I looked up at her questioningly, she just smiled. "I like having you close," she said simply. "Is that okay?" I leaned into her, feeling that same sense of safety and belonging I'd felt that first night. "More than okay," I told her. My friend Sarah noticed us and came over, grinning widely. "You two are disgustingly cute together," she announced. "Seriously, the way you look at each other makes me believe in romance again." Reese ducked her head, embarrassed, but I could see the pleased smile she was trying to hide. Sarah had been one of my biggest supporters through everything with Derek. She'd been the one to help me pack my things when I finally left him. She'd let me stay on her couch for 2 weeks until I found my own apartment. She'd sat with me through countless panic attacks and held my hand through the process of getting the restraining order. Seeing her approve of Reese, seeing them get along and laugh together, meant everything to me. It felt like different parts of my life were finally coming together instead of being compartmentalized. The opening was a success, and afterward, a group of us went out for drinks. Reese was quiet at first, clearly a bit uncomfortable being the only non-artist in the group. But Sarah pulled her into conversation about hiking, discovering they had a shared love of the outdoors. Soon Reese was animatedly describing a trail in Oregon she thought Sarah would love, her whole face lighting up with enthusiasm. I watched her across the table, laughing and relaxed, and felt overwhelmed with love for this woman. This strong, gentle, complicated woman who had entered my life during its darkest period and somehow become my light. On the drive home, Reese reached over and laced her fingers through mine. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Your friends are wonderful. I know it's important to you that we all get along. They love you," I told her. Sarah texted me earlier to say, and I quote, "If you don't marry that woman, I will." Reese laughed, that full, genuine laugh that I'd worked so hard to coax out of her in the early days. "Marriage, huh? Is that something you think about?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Is that too much? Too fast?" She squeezed my hand. "No, I think about it too. About building a life with you. About coming home to you every day. About being there for all the big moments and all the small ones. We've been talking about moving in together next month. Reese wants to make sure I feel completely safe and ready, never wants to rush me or make me feel pressured. But I am ready. I'm ready to build a life with this woman who came into my world as a protector and became my partner, my love, my home. Yesterday, we went apartment hunting. We looked at places with good security, in neighborhoods where I'd feel comfortable walking alone, but also places with character, with space for me to paint, and for Reese to have a home gym. Places that could be ours, not mine or hers, but truly shared. We found one we both loved, a third-floor walk-up in Park Slope with huge windows that flood the space with light. There's a spare room that would be perfect as a studio for me, and the building has a gym in the basement where Reese can work out. The kitchen is small but functional, and there's a rooftop garden where we could have morning coffee. Standing in that empty apartment, imagining our furniture and our life filling the space, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. No fear lurking beneath it, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just happiness. Reese wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "What do you think?" she murmured. "Could you see us here?" I turned in her arms to face her. I can see us anywhere, I told her honestly. But yeah, I love this place. I love the light. I love the neighborhood. I love that we found it together. She kissed me softly. Then let's make it ours. So if you're out there wondering if love can bloom in the middle of chaos, if something real can grow from professional boundaries and difficult circumstances, I'm here to tell you it can. Sometimes the person meant to guard your body ends up capturing your heart instead. And sometimes, in a crowded room full of strangers, the right person will grab your waist and never let go. Not because they have to, but because they can't imagine doing anything else. Looking back, I never could have imagined that the worst period of my life would lead to the best thing that ever happened to me. Derek's obsession was terrifying, and I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. But it brought Reese into my life, and for that, I'll always be grateful. She still protects me, but now it's not her job. It's just who she is. And I protect her right back, in my own way. We protect each other's hearts, our dreams, our vulnerabilities. We protect the space we've created together, this safe haven we've built from trust and honesty and love. I asked her once if she ever regretted taking my case, if the complications that came from our relationship were worth it. She looked at me like I'd asked the most ridiculous question in the world. "Harper," she said, "you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I was going through the motions. I was good at my job, but I didn't love it. I was living, but I wasn't really alive. You woke something up in me that I didn't even know was sleeping." That's what she does for me, too. She makes me feel alive in a way I never did with Derek. With him, I was always performing, always trying to be what he wanted me to be. With Reese, I can just be myself. She loves my weird laugh and my tendency to talk to myself when I'm painting. She loves my strong opinions about art and my terrible singing voice. She loves all the parts of me that Derek tried to change or suppress. We've started talking about the future in concrete terms, where we'll be in 5 years, in 10, whether we want kids someday, or if it'll just be us and maybe a couple of dogs. What our dream vacation would look like. What we want our home to feel like. Reese wants to eventually transition out of bodyguard work. She's thinking about starting her own security consulting business, helping people and companies assess and improve their safety measures. It would mean more regular hours, less danger, more time for us. I'm supporting her in that, encouraging her to take the leap. And I'm finally moving forward with my dream of opening my own gallery. I've been saving for years, and with Reese's encouragement, I've started seriously looking at spaces and creating a business plan. She's been my biggest cheerleader, attending every meeting with me, helping me think through the logistics, celebrating every small victory. Sometimes I think about that night at the gallery when everything changed, when Derek showed up and shattered my fragile sense of safety, when Reese grabbed my waist in the crowd and held on tight. It was terrifying and transformative and somehow perfect, because in that moment, everything became clear. Reese wasn't just my bodyguard, she was my person. The one I wanted beside me in every crowded room, every scary moment, every triumph, and every failure. She was the one I wanted to build a life with, and 6 months later, standing in our future apartment with her arms around me, I'm more certain of that than ever. This is my person. This is my love. This is my forever. That's our story. That's how a terrifying situation became the beginning of the greatest love of my life. Reese still jokes that she was just doing her job that night at the gallery, but we both know the truth. The moment she wrapped her arm around my waist and refused to let go, it stopped being about security. It became about us, about the connection we'd been fighting and denying for weeks, about two people finding each other in the chaos and holding on tight. And we're still holding on. Through apartment hunting and career changes and all the beautiful mundane moments of building a life together, through therapy sessions and difficult conversations and learning how to love each other better, through every challenge and every joy, we're holding on and we're not letting go.